Paris, late 1700s, a city of dazzling palaces and dirty streets where luxury and poverty collide. Aristocrats parade in powdered wigs while most Parisians dodge mud and hunger. Beneath the glamour, tension simmers, the rich feast, the poor scrape by. Philosophers spark debates about liberty and rights, their ideas spreading like wildfire. The city is a powder keg, resentment and hope mixing in every crowded alley. Why should the king live in a palace while others starve? Why do the poor pay all the taxes? The gap between the haves and have-nots grows impossible to ignore. The people are restless, hungry, and starting to question everything. The stage is set for upheaval. Paris is ready to explode. When those with nothing start demanding change, those with everything should worry. The revolution is about to begin, and no one knows what's coming next. For most Parisians, life revolved around bread. Half your income went to it, and bread wasn't just food, it was survival. Every morning the city awoke to the smell of baking loaves, and every evening families gathered around the table, hoping there would be enough to go around. If prices rose, it was a disaster. A bad harvest or a greedy merchant could mean hunger for thousands. The fear of empty shelves haunted every household, and riots over bread were not uncommon. Fashion was a class marker. Nobles wore silk breeches, their wealth on display, while workers wore long trousers, the so-called sans-culottes. What you wore told the world who you were and who you could never be. Work was grueling. Farmers, laborers, and craftsmen toiled endlessly, sunrise to sunset, with no weekends or safety nets. Injuries or illness could mean ruin, and there was little help for those who fell behind. Women's work was even harder. Seamstresses, servants, shopkeepers, always underpaid, always exhausted. Their labor was invisible but essential, keeping households and businesses running. Families were large, not by choice but by necessity. Children meant more hands to help with work, but also more mouths to feed. Every child was both a blessing and a burden. Disease and child mortality were constant threats. Illness could sweep through a home in days, and many parents mourned children lost before their time. Most lived in cramped, crowded rooms, privacy a distant dream. Entire families squeezed into single rooms, sharing beds and blankets with little space to call their own. The daily struggle was about survival, not success. Every day was a battle to find enough food, water, and warmth to make it through to the next. The rich flaunted their privilege, living in luxury and comfort, untouched by the hardships of the poor. Meanwhile, the poor hoped for enough bread to last the week, stretching every crumb and rationing every meal. The city's inequality was visible in every meal, every garment, every street. The gap between rich and poor was impossible to ignore, and resentment simmered just beneath the surface. Life was a relentless grind, and hope was in short supply. For many, dreams of a better future seemed out of reach, but hunger and hardship were forging a new resolve. People began to realize that together they could demand change. The people were ready for change, and the first sparks of revolution were about to ignite. Hunger is a powerful motivator. By 1789, bad harvests sent bread prices soaring and desperation filled the streets. The tax system made it worse. Nobles and clergy paid almost nothing while everyone else, the Third Estate, carried the burden. It was injustice on top of starvation. Rumors of grain hoarding and royal extravagance fueled anger. The king's reforms were too little, too late. He seemed out of touch, offering complex solutions when people just wanted bread. Resentment boiled over as the poor watched the privileged feast. The city buzzed with fear, anger, and rumors. The government's failure to act pushed people to the brink. The streets of Paris became a tinderbox. The people weren't asking for luxury, just survival. When the government couldn't deliver, the people decided to act. Hunger turned to rage, and rage turned to revolution. The old order was about to face its reckoning. July 14, 1789. Parisians stormed the Bastille, not for prisoners but for what it symbolized, the king's absolute power and the centuries-old oppression of the people. The Bastille, a medieval fortress, had long been a symbol of royal tyranny, and its fall marked a turning point in French history. Its collapse sent a thunderous message across France. The people were done waiting for change. They were ready to take their fate into their own hands, and the world was watching. Soon after, thousands of determined women marched to Versailles, braving the rain and mud, demanding bread for their starving families and confronting the king face to face in his own palace. Their courage forced the royal family back to Paris, ending the monarchy's isolation and bringing the king under the watchful eyes of the people. In the wake of these events, the National Assembly issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man, proclaiming liberty, equality, and fraternity for all citizens, a radical new vision for society. Overnight, centuries of privilege vanished. Nobles and clergy who once held untouchable status suddenly found themselves equal to everyone else under the law. Many aristocrats fled the country, terrified for their lives, while paranoia and suspicion gripped the revolutionaries left behind. France now felt surrounded by enemies, both inside its borders and beyond. Foreign armies threatened invasion, and traitors were suspected everywhere. The revolution's early hope and optimism quickly gave way to suspicion, fear, and a sense that danger lurked around every corner. The king, once the most powerful man in France, was now a prisoner of the people, his fate uncertain and his authority gone. The old world was collapsing before everyone's eyes, and a new one was being built, fast, chaotic, and full of promise and peril. The revolution was now unstoppable, but also unpredictable. No one knew what tomorrow would bring, or who would rise and fall next. The excitement of change was quickly replaced by anxiety and fear, as ordinary people wondered what the future held for themselves and their families. The party was over. The struggle for survival had just begun. Hunger, uncertainty, and unrest became the new reality for many. France stood at a crossroads, teetering on the edge of something even bigger, a future that would reshape not just a nation but the world. The revolution turned dark. King Louis tried to flee, was caught and executed. France plunged into chaos, fighting wars abroad and enemies within. The radical Jacobins, led by Robespierre, unleashed the reign of terror. Anyone suspected of opposing the revolution faced the guillotine. No one was safe. Spies and informants were everywhere. Trust vanished. The guillotine became a symbol of fear, not freedom. Trials were a sham. Executions were public spectacle. Even children grew up in a world of suspicion and violence. The church was attacked, the calendar changed, and daily life was upended. Surviving meant silence and caution. One wrong word could be fatal. The revolution devoured its own, and paranoia ruled the streets. The promise of liberty was drowned in blood. France was forever changed by the terror. The terror finally ended, and Robespierre himself met the same fate as so many of his victims, executed by the very machine he once wielded. The streets that had echoed with fear and suspicion now fell eerily silent as France tried to make sense of the chaos left behind. France emerged from the bloodshed transformed, no more rigid social classes, everyone was now called a citizen, at least in theory. The old titles and privileges were swept away, replaced by a new sense of possibility and uncertainty. Merit, not birth, was supposed to matter now. Ambition and talent could open doors that had once been locked tight by ancestry. The old guilds and restrictions vanished, opening new opportunities for men in work, business, and the military. For the first time, ordinary people could dream of rising through the ranks. Napoleon Bonaparte, once an unknown Corsican, rose from obscurity, proof that talent and determination could now trump noble title. His meteoric rise inspired many, but also foreshadowed new challenges ahead. For women, the revolution was bittersweet. They fought for change, marched in protests, and demanded rights, but were ultimately pushed back into traditional roles as the new order took shape. The dream of equality was still incomplete. Many hopes remained unfulfilled, and the promise of liberty was unevenly shared. Yet, a new national identity took root. The tricolor flag, the Marseillaise, and even the metric system became powerful symbols of a new France, united in spirit if not always in practice. The revolution tried to remake everything: politics, society, even how people measured time and space. New laws, new calendars, and new ways of thinking swept across the land. The old world was gone, but the new one was still taking shape. France was rebuilding itself, brick by brick, idea by idea. The fight for rights and equality was far from over. Each generation would have to continue the struggle, pushing the revolution's ideals further. The revolution's legacy was both inspiring and unfinished, a beacon for the world but also a reminder of how hard true change can be. France was a nation reborn, but still searching for its soul, a country forever changed, and forever reaching for the promise of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The French Revolution wasn't just a French story, it changed the world. Its ideals, liberty, equality, fraternity, became the foundation for modern democracy and human rights. It proved that ordinary people could topple the powerful and reshape society. But it also showed how revolutions can spiral into violence and chaos. The journey from hope to terror is a warning about the dangers of extremism. Even today, our political language, left and right, comes from the revolution's legacy. Nationalism, democracy, and debates about freedom all trace back to this moment. The revolution's questions still echo: what do we owe each other? What is the price of freedom? Progress is messy, and the struggle for justice never ends. The revolution's shadow stretches into our own time. Its lessons and its warnings are as urgent now as ever.